Welcome back, everybody. Today we're discussing Loki episode 5. This video is going to be a little more structured, so if it feels a little awkward or if you like the way that I have been doing it, please let me know in the comments below. But let's jump right into it. This episode brought us to the Void, introduced us to a murder of Loki, and we watched as Lightning McQueen saved the day once again.
And you too can look like me! Ka-chow!
Starting off with my overall thoughts, I genuinely enjoyed this episode. I loved seeing the Void. It leaves open the possibility of us seeing other realms such as Hell at some point, which I think would be amazing. I loved the different Lokis and them all stabbing each other in the back to really highlight this oh so critical part of his being. He stabs people in the back, it's just what he does. Part of me really thinks that they've highlighted this fact enough for us to expect one of these two to backstab each other during the finale, because it's been in front of our faces this entire time. Another even deeper part of me really hopes that this is the exception. This episode begins where the last left off, with Loki inside of the Void, a section of the timeline that exists beyond the timeline and can only be accessed by pruning yourself. Sylvie trusts Ravonna because plot, and then she betrays her, leading to a nice vacation in the Void herself. Loki awakens to see the other versions of himself that allow him to tag along and ask a ton of expositional questions. They escape the giant smoke monster from Lost, now named Elliott, that actually destroys the things pruned from the timeline. It looks like the majority of those with the cunning to survive are Lokis, and these marble chickens? I'm not sure what to call them, but it does look like something out of No Man's Sky, and I love that. We get to further explore how the timeline works, with every Loki detailing their past and their Nexus event, until eventually we meet even more Lokis that highlight just how bad a Loki can be, with most trying to backstab in one way or another. Kid Loki, Classic Loki, Florida Loki, and Okie Dokie Loki escape the chaos and come to the conclusion that they need to face off against the great Elliott, with the hopes that defeating this monster could somehow change their stars. The others are reluctant at first, but agree to take him, believing that the task is still impossible. Meanwhile, Sylvie enters the Void. We get a glimpse of some kind of castle, revealing to us that Sylvie can enchant this being with enough time. She gets saved by Mobius, and they have a nice discussion about this world and their love for Loki, and how sorry they were for the bad that they both have caused for everything, until eventually they all meet up, ready to face Elliott together. Back at the TVA, we see Ravonna talking to Hunter B-15 about her assisting the variants, trying to isolate what their plan may be so that she herself can figure out who is behind the TVA. We get some really sweet moments where Loki is trying to cuddle up with Sylvie, Mobius talking to the other variants about them changing their stars, and finally, it's time to face off against the great Elliott. They say their goodbyes, Mobius is given the temp pad to try his best to bring down the TVA from the inside, and the kid gives Loki a powerful Chekhov sword, which will undoubtedly need to be paid off during the finale. The plan is no longer to kill this entity, but to enchant it, but it quickly becomes much harder than expected. They try to single out a branch of Elliott, but instead of charging Loki, the cloud targets Sylvie, and they are saved by Classic Loki. He rebuilds all of Asgard in front of him to direct his attention. It was a glorious moment that I think really highlights how good a Loki can be. A complete, selfless act on his part, even projecting the lightning associated with Thor to reference again what home really means to him. I absolutely love this so very much, and because of his story with Thanos, it's possible that he is still alive and, this inanimate object, but ultimately I don't see the reason for it. He gave his life to help others, creating and fulfilling his glorious purpose. It was magical. Loki and Sylvie hold hands, and enchant the beast together, turning bright green and revealing the palace we see here. It's still unclear who lives here, but only time will tell. Always. In terms of penultimate episodes, I think it was above average, but still missing something. We didn't have a big reveal of a villain right at the end, which I think a lot of shows do to kind of build a drama as we go into the final episode, so that we could further explore who that character is during the final episode. So either they are ending with a big cliffhanger, or the big bad is someone that we already know intimately. So yeah, I don't know. Also, this part.
I can help you if you trust me.
Now, when this happened, I laughed. She has been running for her entire life. Nobody can even fathom what that looks like, honestly. Since she was a child running because of this person, and specifically this person grabbing her from her home and starting this entire thing, she would not trust you in a million billion years. You can put your hand down. There's not a chance in hell she's going to. What? I'm sorry, what? Excuse me? Someone explain this. Like, I'm 5. Why did she do this? Why in the world would she give her this temp pad? Like, tell her you're going to hold on to it and have her walk you through whatever she needs it for. This is the ultimate tool. This is how you've survived for so many years, and you just give it to her because she said to trust her. What? How? Also, another big pain point that was created from this episode was how the TVA has been managing Nexus level events and how the multiverse was described to us. At the start of the show, we were led to believe the multiverse is bad. It points us in the direction of total annihilation, so the TVA destroys every reality that isn't the sacred timeline, so it doesn't become chaos that it once was. So only the sacred timeline can exist, right? Wrong. This episode and the further detailing of these Nexus events shows us that timelines could exist for millennium, for decades. In the case of Old Man Loki, he wasn't ever going to harm anyone or affect anything by being alone. So they allowed his timeline and that deviation to exist alongside the sacred timeline for a great number of years. It was only when he realized that he was lonely that he tried to do something that wasn't isolation, and he had to be dealt with. So, if that's true, the graphics from episode 1 are complete trash. The multiverse exists more than just the sacred timeline exists, and they all exist alongside the sacred timeline, only needing to be addressed when they could possibly interfere. It feels like really bad writing masked as, a unreliable narrator because we now know the TVA doesn't fully understand what they're doing. It just feels really odd that we were led to believe that the multiverse inherently meant ultimate doom when it doesn't. It really doesn't. It already exists. And something nearing the red line doesn't mean a new timeline is starting, like, again, the graphics led us to believe. It just means that timeline is dangerously close to interfering with the sacred timeline. Now, this might not be the right section for theory crafting, but another way the red line system and the timeline could make sense is if everything that we're seeing is the sacred timeline, meaning the TVA isn't outside of the timeline like they were led to believe, and everything that happens with Mobius, Sylvie, and Loki was always meant to happen. That's why when Sylvie and Loki are having that genuine connection, it's like, code red, this isn't actually supposed to happen right now. I think it would be a pretty neat twist if done well, and I think it also might be why this episode starts with them showing us that nothing bad is happening on the sacred timeline, because it is all according to plan. There is a lot of highlights and really special moments in this episode, but I think specifically every moment that Florida Loki was on screen, amazing. Honestly, could not get enough. Classic Loki giving his life for glorious purpose, I think will stand out in my mind for a long time, just because it was such a grandiose moment from a character we had just met, but somehow carried so much more weight than I think it should have because of the writing and the acting by Richard Grant. Mobius and Loki saying goodbye honestly felt like a really touching moment, but based on how the finale ends, I really feel like this could be one of those times where, in hindsight, this is much more manipulative than it first appeared. I'm not sure why, but again, Mobius really comes out ahead of everybody else in the sense that he now has so much more information, now has a temp pad to travel. It kind of makes me nervous, but at the same time, I like Mobius. I think he might just be a genuinely good character. A couple more of my favorite moments were the backstab Loki scene where all of the Lokis showed exactly what makes them Lokis, and finally, a general shout out for all of the Easter eggs. So many Easter eggs in this episode, seeing Throg, seeing the Thanos copter, top tier. Now, this episode was filled with information about the world building, and again, it seemingly changed some of the dogma that we had about how the timeline was working according to the TVA. The big theory crafter question that really remains at the end of all of this is, who is it? Who is past the void, sitting in this palace, enjoying eternity that has been tailored to exist for a glorious and yet to be revealed purpose? Well, I think the answer is pretty obvious at this point. It's Loki. Because Kang the Conqueror wasn't revealed in this episode and we don't have that additional week to kind of, contemplate and think about the implications of that big bad reveal, I think the big bad will be somebody that we already know. I think it will either be one of the Lokis that we know or a Loki Supreme or Loki King that has created this entire plot to ensure that he remains the only all-powerful Loki. Throughout this series, we have been fed this idea of identity with the line, what makes a Loki a Loki? We also have this reoccurring theme of betrayal. Nobody able to trust the other because of this rational fear of betrayal and lying that makes it literally impossible to know if a Loki is even dead or not. They are absolutely snakes. And I think the reason that we got such a powerful display of the good that a Loki can be during this last episode is because then we get to see the worst that a Loki can be in the next, maybe in the finale. That might come in the form of a betrayal by Sylvie or Loki or even the Loki Supreme. When we saw the classic Loki manifest all of Asgard, it reminded me immediately of the city at the TVA. This is something that I think should have been explored further. We should have been shown more than this. And after the reveal that these were androids, it really feels like a lot of this could be smoke and mirrors. The city is described briefly and then they just move right along. We're shown these mirrored rooms with meaningless identifiers that are meant to give the illusion of depth. Loki questioned this right away. And what if he was right? What if a Supreme Loki created this and it's all just an illusion? This also reminds me of a line by Loki in episode 2 when Loki is describing his powers of projection to Mobius.
How? Illusion projection involves depicting a detailed image from outside oneself which is perceptible in the external world, whereas duplication casting entails recreating an exact facsimile of one's own body in its present circumstance, which acts as a true holographic mirror of its molecular structure.
At the time, for me, this just felt really specific, far more than we needed explained in the moment for the audience to understand. I think it was intentional. I think this could be the answer where Supreme Loki is literally projecting their self into this world as one of the Lokis that we've met, or is doing something like manifesting this entire city to make the TVA appear bigger or, more complex than it actually is. Another really important development that occurs over the course of the show is how Lokis can adapt and learn new spells. The first couple of episodes do a great job of defining the differences of this Loki and the sacred Loki that we've known for years by way of their magical abilities. It's clearly defining this Loki as different because he can do things that the sacred timeline Loki has never done before. As the series goes on, we meet more and different Loki with different abilities. Episode 4 then reveals that Sylvie had been learning all of this at the ends of 1,000 worlds. And now during this episode, Sylvie tells Loki that he can do what she's doing, and together they actually stop Elliott. A single Loki is capable of different types of magic, they just need to try and learn them as it's revealed in this episode. Well, if you are a Loki sitting beyond time, you are capable of surely a great number of things by now. Who's to say that this Loki isn't simply mastering all of the magic in the known universe, because after all,
blades are worthless in the face of a Loki's sorcery. They stunt our magical potential.
Assuming that they have been learning from all of the other Lokis this entire time, I wonder if Sylvie isn't actually the target here because her powers are so powerful, literally breaking the illusion cast on the workers of the TVA, and now this King Loki or Supreme Loki wants that for himself. Whatever the case may be, the first season of Loki has been amazing, and I'm still up in the air on how I feel about them announcing another season, already being decided. Part of me really thinks that we're heading for a huge cliffhanger, but another part of me genuinely trusts the people behind the show to continue their success and finish strong. I think it is still very possible that Kang the Conqueror is a part of this plot, or even some other big bads that exist in this very powerful capacity. But honestly, I think it makes so much more sense if this ends up being Loki all along. But with that, we come to the end of the video. Please let me know if you have any theories or thoughts in the comments down below, and be sure to subscribe if you have not. Special thank you to everybody that supports me on here as well as Patreon, including this month's highest tier donor, Michael Linck. If you want more Hacks Dogma commentary about Marvel, life, love, and the pursuit of happiness, follow me on Twitter, and now making videos on TikTok as well. Much love, everybody, and I cannot wait to talk to you all again very soon.